Okay, peeps, welcome back. So today we're going to be talking about LTCN BCHG HZEN and ETCG. And is it time to buy the dip? Let's get it. So, real quick, before we get into the content of the Grayscale Trust, we'll talk about Bitcoin for a second. So, as you guys can see, we're having a pretty large dump here. We did tell you guys at some point that we were expecting a pretty sizable retracement. How deep exactly this is going to go is anybody's guess. But we're not really surprised that it's pulling back again. Just on the weekly, you guys can see how massively overextended still we are from the EMAs here. So, it could potentially be as much as 37% drop from here. But keep in mind, every single week that passes, the EMAs will move up, even if the price comes down. So long as the price is above the EMAs will move up. And basically, there will be like a convergence of the two where the EMAs are moving up in time, but the price action is moving down in time, which basically signals a potential bounce zone. When we see the price hit the EMAs, that could be where it bounces. It could be before or after that. We don't know. So that's the first thing. Second thing I wanted to point out here is the FOMC meeting is today and tomorrow. And there is a potential that the Fed could begin to cut rates this month. Markets actually projecting that it's going to be in either May or June. So 3 months from now, they're not projecting it to be right now. But with the CPI recently coming in a little bit hotter than expected, markets are starting to think maybe there's only going to be 2 rate cuts this year. So we may not even get one until the end of Q3, beginning of Q4, something like that. But what I want to point out to you guys is the last time we had rate cuts, the very last time we had rate cuts was during the pandemic dump of 2020. Why is this significant? As you guys can see on Bitcoin alone, from the top at that time to the bottom, we had a 63% drop on Bitcoin. This is not meant to scare anybody. It's just to reiterate the effect that the rate cuts have on crypto and risk on assets. Because generally speaking, when the Fed begins to cut, that signals to it's good for the economy. That's true because it makes borrowing cheaper. But in terms of the market, it signals to the markets that, hey, it's about to hit the fan. They're not cutting out of the cut into their heart. Obviously, something's broken, so everybody starts to sell off. And historically, that's kind of what happens. So I'll get back to why I'm telling you guys this in a second. So we'll go over here to total 3. We'll also look at this for 2020. Reason being is because this is the basically pretty much everything minus Ethereum and Bitcoin market cap. You guys can see the start of the dump right here. So we take a look at this. You can see altcoins actually dumped even more than Bitcoin, so minus 70%. So just to show you guys in real time, we're actually going to pull up the Fed funds rate on the right. Just give me a second on this. So Fed funds rate on the right. Unfortunately, it only shows the monthlies. So as you guys can see, Fed cut rates started cutting rates in 2019. We'll actually move this over a little bit so you guys can see kind of the full effects of this. So you can see the top of where the Fed was holding rates here, and then they started cutting, and you guys can see that Bitcoin was slowly selling off here off to the left, right? So basically from this candle top right here, it kind of just sold off a lot. Actually, it had already dumped about 50% from that point, but once the Fed went emergency mode and did like super cuts here, you guys can see the effect that the Fed cutting rates had on the markets. So again, your Fed funds rate on the right, the downtrend is the cutting, the uptrend is the hiking, and obviously Bitcoin is on the left. So the whole point I'm making of this is when the Fed begins to cut, it's possible that Bitcoin and cryptos could dump a lot. We could see something very similar to the pandemic dump. Us personally, we have a great amount of capital set on the side, and one of the reasons why we have that amount set on the side, I'm not going to say specifically what it is, but it's a lot. Emergency fund is one reason. It's just a good idea to have some cash just in case, acts of God, things of that nature. So, but another reason is to buy the dip massively on crypto if it happens. This includes the Grayscale Trust. So if that happens and we see it, we'll be ready to go to load the boat as the thing's crashing all the way down to the bottom. Just to give you guys an example of that, the last time that we did this during the pandemic dump, we were buying shares of the index funds that we had, and it went from, I think, minus that 3,000 to plus 13,000 by the time the market had peaked after it made the V-shaped recovery. So that, I mean, you guys get the idea. The buying the dip in that scenario on crypto could be huge. So let's get into the actual content now. So it looks like LTCN is rejecting. Main reason why a lot of these are actually dropping is because, again, the crypto market as a whole is dumping, which is kind of to be expected because, again, we hit all-time highs before the halving. This has never happened. So I was kind of expecting a retracement at some point, but again, it's just another opportunity to buy the dip because the real bull run has yet to show its head. I've taken a look at a lot of different indicators and all that stuff relating to Bitcoin and altcoins, and I am thoroughly convinced that we have not seen the top yet. So LTCN could be pulling back. Your chance to get in on the cheap could be somewhere in between $13.50 to about $18, or pretty much anywhere in the zone. So 13 to 15 bucks. Just to give you guys an idea of how much that could be, it could be another negative 20 to at least 34%. If you manage to pick up some there, it will be a pretty large move up, 67 to about 87%. So that's LTCN, and this is absolutely possible. We have LTCN. We actually added some shares to ETCG this morning, so ETH Classic, on the dip because, as you guys can see here, it went down 9%. We kind of wanted to add to HZEN, but we didn't because, again, it's only negative 2%. So, but to each their own. So HZEN, this one, as you guys can see, this wick up here kind of matches up with all these candle wicks here. So I'd say once we get past this zone, HZEN is going to fly off the handle and probably start really moonshotting because there is a lot of selling pressure and resistance here. At some point in the future, I'll throw on the VPVR, which is basically the volume profile. It shows you guys like where the major volume comes in for particular price levels and trading levels. This is another tool that we don't personally use in trading, but sometimes we do look at it. So HZEN looks like it could be poised to drop back down to this support zone, which is roughly around $4. Again, keep in mind the EMAs are kind of in between these zones, so roughly about $2 to $5. DCA strategy may perhaps be your best bet here, not financial advice. So if you get in at the zone, you're talking about 73 to 100, all the way up to potentially 162%. So massive, massive move there. BCHG, this is, I mean, it still looks very bullish on the chart, but as you guys can see, the EMAs and the price have yet to converge again to rebalance the uptrend, so to speak. As you guys can see here, price went up, came back to the EMAs while the EMAs were moving up, and then we took off from there. So that could be in the cards. We'll just have to wait and see. But it did get a rejection off of here, so it could come back down to the support. Support's between 680 to 750. If you get in there and you get a bounce, you could be looking at as much as 40% to 65, maybe even 76%. Keep in mind, this is not even touching the potential for the all-time highs, which is way up here. If we just do one example on the Fibonacci's here on BCHG from the macro high to the macro low, you can see the levels are huge. I mean, they're way, way, way higher than where we currently are. So whether you choose to trade the levels or just simply buy and hold to where you think the top is, that's completely up to you, but we're giving you both options here. So ETCG, this one's had a pretty large pullback. It's getting close to the EMAs in that trend line, so we're thinking we're probably going to be stacking this one while we wait for HZEN to drop. Give you guys an example of what the drop looked like so far. It's already down roughly about 30% from the peak, so it's already had a pretty nice retracement. It may be poised, especially if crypto turns bullish again here soon, Bitcoin and all that, to have another massive bounce. So you could either wait a little bit longer for it to get down to the trend line at 1220, or you could get in now at support between $13 to $15.80. It's pretty much sitting right at the bottom of that support. Resistance is $17.60 to $20. If you chose to get in now, you'd be looking at 34 to about a 52% move. If you wanted to wait a little bit longer and say, nah, screw that, I'm going to get in at the trend line, it'd be a much bigger move. So 46 to about 66%. GXLM, this one kind of looks like it potentially had a fake out there. It did not cross above the resistance zone, so that was a clear indication with this wick at the top that we weren't yet ready to move to the upside. This one's kind of a tough one to read, so I would say that if it comes back down to the EMAs, that may be potentially a good place to start buying. So this thing has quite a ways, as you guys can see, about 25 to as much as 40% to get back down to those EMAs. But just assuming you got in somewhere in there, maybe at the top of these candles here on the left, as you guys can see, you'd be looking at about 67 to 85%. So the Grayscale ETH Trust, this is the actual Ethereum, not the ETH Classic. As you guys can see, it got basically had a fake out to the upside. So we popped up and then we shot back down. That does happen sometimes in trading, but more often than not, it will typically flip a zone, either from support into resistance or resistance into support. This was clearly a fake out of some kind, or what's better known in trading as a bull trap. So it could stop here, bounce from support off 25.50 to 29 and then head back up, or it could retrace into these EMAs or this little mini support kind of gap area here. So that would be anywhere from 17.30 to 18, maybe as high as $22. So we'll just assume you got in somewhere in there. You'd be looking at about 30, 47, even as much as 80%. So Zcash, that was clearly a very bearish candle right there. Massive, massive wick to the upside. So yeah, that one wasn't quite ready to shoot to all-time highs yet. But I mean, in terms of how these will probably move in the bull run, I would say that the first ones that are going to run is probably going to be LTCN, BCHG. Those two will probably run first. Main reason being is because they're direct oscillators to Bitcoin. Then what comes after that is probably going to be the ETH and ETCG, because again, once Bitcoin's done running, Ethereum will run up, and then ETH Classic is an oscillator to Ethereum. And then the altcoins will follow shortly after that. So you're going to get your BCHG, GXLM, and pretty much the rest of these that follow suit shortly after Ethereum tops out. So current support between $4.40 to about $5, $7.30 up to $8 is resistance. So assuming we get back down here somewhere in these EMAs and at support, you'd be looking at as much as 67, 85, and potentially as high as about 115%. So big move there. GSOL, this thing looks like it might be trying to come back down to these EMAs and supports. So me personally, I would not buy this unless it got into the zone. So that's 175 to 200, but you could buy at these EMAs too. You can see this wick bounced from the support and the EMAs pretty hard when it did. So the EMA, the blue one, is at 223. That's just above support. So if you got in there, you'd be looking at a huge move here, almost 220%. Mana, this is basically the underlying for this is Decentraland. Decentraland has gone up, but it hasn't really started taking off yet like Solana, so there's a lot of potential upside for this one. I would be potentially looking for a bounce off of the top of these candles somewhere. That's probably likely to happen, I would say. So about your $20 level or so, that's kind of where I would expect this thing to bounce. But if you manage to get it in there, and you can actually remeasure this, you'd be looking at a huge move. So 250%, that's a large move. GBAT, as you guys can see, the EMAs serve its purpose. It is basically a retracement tool, and or it serves as a median or medium, where it basically comes back down to where the price should be. Then it bounces, and when it gets too overextended to the upside or downside, that's kind of what these EMAs are used for. So it bounced heavily off of that. I would say that it didn't quite touch the top of these candles, but it came pretty close. So maybe somewhere between the blue EMA And the yellow EMA might be a good time to start getting in. So you're looking at roughly about $9.60 to $15 per share. It's a pretty wide range. It's up to you guys where you want to pick this up at, but I would, if it was me, I would just DCAN as it's coming down. That's just me. So you could be looking at as much as 234%. So huge move there. So yeah, this is the update that we have for LTCN, BCHG, HZEN, and ETCG, and the rest of the grayscale trusts. Again, the Fed could be cutting rates today or tomorrow. It's kind of a coin flip, in my opinion, whether they're going to do it or not, because they have kind of been saying the whole higher for longer thing. So on one side of the fence, it wouldn't really surprise me if they came out just out of the blue, out of nowhere, and was like, yep, we're going to cut rates this month, while they're simultaneously telling everybody in the markets that they're not, that they're going to wait another 6 months to cut or something like that. That could happen. Or the alternative is that they could be telling the truth and they could say, well, we are going to wait till the end of the year, and then they actually don't cut till the end of the year. One of those two scenarios could happen. If they cut immediately, I would say that there's probably some more drops to come. Or the inverse happens. What we think is going to happen is that the markets are going to go up, or they wait till later in the year and then the markets go down, or they continue to go up. So far, we've seen that every time that the Fed said that they're going to not cut rates, that they're going to wait, the markets have gone up from that point. So it's difficult to say exactly what's going to happen. When they say that they're not going to cut right away, the initial reaction, generally speaking, is usually an initial sell-off, and then we see a massive rally afterwards. So it's hard to know exactly what the market's going to do when the Fed cuts, but we'll just have to wait and see. So anyways, hope you all enjoyed this content. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see y'all later. Peace.